Right now, we're keeping track of a couple of tropical waves moving through the main development region into South and Central America. And taking a look at the current water vapor, we do see plenty of thunderstorm activity going on right over Central America as well as South America. However, we do see that the wind shear is quite strong, where the upper level winds are moving from a southwesterly direction, as you can see based on how fast the clouds are moving towards the northeast. And eventually, a lot of this moisture you see right over Central America will move over the Caribbean islands and potentially bring up to 10 inches of rainfall in certain areas of Jamaica, Cuba, and potentially as far east as Haiti. In terms of the possibility that a tropical cyclone develops out of one of these tropical waves moving through the Caribbean, it seems low at this time thanks to the strong amount of wind shear we're seeing over the Caribbean, as well as the fact that there's a decent amount of dry air that exists over the Gulf of Mexico. However, there of course could be that possibility conditions could change over the next 7 days, and the GFS model does want to develop a well-defined low pressure system right over Cuba, which could potentially develop into a tropical entity if everything goes correctly. However, the chance of that is still low thanks to the strong wind shear and the amount of dry air that's expected to potentially inhibit this storm system as it moves towards Cuba. So it might not be necessarily something to worry about right now, but it's at least something to be aware of right over the Caribbean islands. Taking a look at the global tropics hazards outlook over the next 3 weeks is something we're gonna take a look at throughout the hurricane season to really see when's our next possibility we could see tropical cyclone development. So for week 2, which is a week between June 7th and June 13th, we see that the conditions should stay relatively drier than normal right over the Caribbean. So of course the possibility of a tropical cyclone is definitely less imminent. However, I do believe that it might be inaccurate thanks to the fact that later during the week, of course, Cuba and Jamaica will receive heavy rainfall. So take this outlook with a grain of salt. And then headed into week 3, we do see that the outlook states that just north of the main development region, we could see more precipitation than usual. So there definitely is an enhanced risk of a tropical cyclone developing in this area, since there's of course more convection, and what's required for a tropical cyclone to develop is a high amount of convection. And we could see that for week 3 between June 14th and June 20th, just to the northeast of the Caribbean islands. In terms of the 7-day graphical tropical weather outlook provided from the National Hurricane Center, we do see that the only imminent threat when it comes to tropical cyclone development is this tropical disturbance that's well to the north of the main development region. If this does develop into a tropical storm, it would be considered subtropical thanks to its latitude, that where it's very far up north, where the sea surface temperatures are cooler than 80 degrees, and of course it's going to need instability to really enhance the storm's intensity to a potentially tropical storm status, but it only has a 10% chance of developing into a tropical storm. The wind shear is quite strong this far up north in the Atlantic, especially during this time of the year. The sea surface temperatures are cooler than average, so most likely, even if this were to have the winds that are equivalent to a tropical storm, it might not necessarily be considered tropical thanks to the fact that there isn't really a tropical entity, or the center of circulation isn't really developing in a manner that is where it's able to create its own heat engine to be considered a tropical storm. So most likely this won't develop. However, across Portugal and Spain, you may need to watch out for gustier winds and heavy rain associated with this tropical disturbance, whether this develops into a tropical cyclone or not. Take a look at the GFS's model's forecast when it comes to the relative humidity in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. we do see that eventually this humidity that's located over Central America and South America will move northward towards Cuba and Jamaica, and all that moisture will be concentrated in that very small area, because we're going to have a ridge that's going to steer a lot of this moisture further northward, as well as a surface level low located in the northern United States, as well as an upper level low that's going to be located over the southeast. That's pretty much going to compress this moisture into a very small area right over Cuba and Jamaica, and that's where the heaviest rainfall will be. And this instability associated with this upper level low located just to the northwest of this storm will only enhance the rainfall right over Cuba and Jamaica, even if this low pressure system isn't necessarily a tropical entity at all or a tropical cyclone. So in Jamaica, Cuba, you need to pay very close attention to very heavy rainfall over the next several days. And of course, in terms of this low pressure system that the GFS wants to develop, in terms of the possibility that this develops into Tropical Storm Bret, so we do see that while it's in a small bubble of moisture, we also see that the winds will along the surface as well as in the upper levels will be quite strong with this storm, because like I said, we have a very strong Bermuda ridge that's steering this further northward, as well as a mid-latitude cyclone that's located right over the northeast that's bringing a strong amount of surface level winds that's going to steer the storm very fast to the northeast. And typically storms don't really do well when the winds move a little bit too fast, or when the storms themselves move a little bit too fast, because it doesn't allow the winds to circulate around the center of circulation in all sides for a reliable heat engine to develop, because all that heat will be diverted away from the center of circulation well further northward, instead of circulating around the center of circulation, thanks to the surface level winds being so strong from the southwest. So that will definitely inhibit its chances of developing into a tropical storm. And it's not only that, the upper level winds will be quite strong, so the wind shear will be quite strong. So it's going to be very difficult for this storm to develop organize enough heat engine around the center circulation for this to create enough convection around center circulation for this to develop into a tropical storm. Here is a wind shear forecast provided from the GFS model, and the GFS model is showing a very similar scenario, where we do see that the GFS model is forecasting a light amount of wind shear right around the southern Caribbean, but we see the wind shear right over the Gulf of Mexico, and much of the Caribbean islands is quite strong. So this area of moisture is definitely going to have a difficult time of developing a well-defined low pressure system with this much wind shear, so it's unlikely to develop into a tropical storm. But regardless if this develops into a tropical cyclone or not, Jamaica and Cuba will still experience very heavy rainfall, and likely flooding will be widespread associated with this area of moisture. So you need to pay close attention to that all over the Caribbean islands. The European model is a little bit less confident that the wind shear will be as strong. So, of course, in the European model scenario, there could be a higher possibility that this area of moisture does develop into a tropical storm, but the chance is still unlikely. And in fact, the European model does not expect even a well-defined area of low pressure to develop just north of Cuba, as we don't see the low pressure icon right over Cuba at around the same time period as the GFS model, as the European model doesn't expect as much moisture or convection to be associated with this storm system. But again, remember that even if this doesn't develop into a tropical cyclone, expect heavy rain right over Cuba and Jamaica. In terms of anything else that we need to take note of as we approach a more long-term future, so moving forward with the forecast, we're going to see numerous tropical waves make landfall right over South America, but of course they won't necessarily bring much of anything outside of rain. But still, watch out for heavy rainfall all throughout the northern portions of South America associated with these tropical disturbances. And moving even more forward, we do see that there's going to be a continuous stream of moisture, and in the very long-term future, the GFS model does want to develop a tropical entity, but this is very far out. Definitely don't even take this into consideration just yet as having a possibility of developing, because we're over 300 hours out. But I'll keep you guys updated over the next several days regarding the next few tropical disturbances that are going to move just south of the main development region and into South America, because we could potentially see something out of one of these tropical disturbances in the more long-term future if this continues right over South America. And here's the forecasted amount of rainfall that the GFS model is expecting over the next 5 days. And we do see that portions of Jamaica and Cuba could experience up to 8 inches of rain and potentially more than that. And we do see that if you're in the purples, you should expect anywhere from 3 to 5 inches of rain. So this will likely cause widespread flooding, especially in the higher elevations. So you need to definitely pay very close attention to this on those islands, especially if you live in an area that's very vulnerable to flooding. So this is my forecast regarding the next few tropical waves moving through the Caribbean. So it's so we're unlikely at this point to see any of these tropical disturbances develop into a tropical storm, but you still need to be aware of the potential of major flooding right over Cuba and Jamaica and even other areas of South America and Central America, since it is likely that we're going to see multiple tropical disturbances move through over the next few weeks, and we could potentially see maybe a possibility of a tropical cyclone developing out of one of these tropical disturbances, even if it isn't necessarily in the National Hurricane Center's 7-day outlook. We could be talking about this possibility in the more long-term future, where if this trend were to continue. But I'll keep you guys updated over the next several weeks as the hurricane season goes on. But that's it for now, guys, and I thank you guys for watching.